Hi, welcome to Chapter 11, Strategic Change, Culture, and Leadership. So in this chapter, we're going to talk about organizational culture, the role of strategic leadership, and executing strategic change. So, some important reminders about strategy execution. You must consider the plan for implementation before adopting any strategic alternative. So what does that plan mean? How is it going to affect the culture of the company, the business of the company? What is the time frame of the implementation? What are additional resources or human capital needed for the implementation? So before you adapt that strategic alternative, you really need a plan for the implementation of that strategy, and is it doable? So the more complex the strategic change overall, of course, the more complex the implementation. Now let's talk about organizational culture. So there's a whole study of organizational behavior that does talk about and references the culture of a business. So each business is like a family, and each family has their own unique ways of doing things, traditions, norms, and accepted behaviors. So organizations are no different. They have their own shared values, language, priorities, beliefs that together form the culture of that organization, and it's derived from the members of the organization that create and reinforce that culture. Now, hopefully the organization's culture and its strategies are in alignment. So if the organizational culture is more focused on ethics and social responsibility, it's not going to take well to shifting the company away from, saying, producing whole foods and organic foods into coal production. It's just not going to be a strategic cultural fit. Now, within each company's culture, there are subcultures. So that's a culture within a culture, or a subclique. So you may have a particular culture of the company, but the accounting department may have their own unique culture that is existing within the culture of the overall corporation. And you have to hope that the subcultures are in alignment with the overall organizational culture, otherwise conflicts will arrive. So, adaptive cultures is just like it sounds like. They are cultures that adapt when the members in the organization are open-minded and they're willing to embrace new ideas, change, that are consistent with the company's core values. So adaptive cultures are usually the most successful cultures in emphasizing innovation, developing new products, enhancing research and development efforts, encouraging initiative among its employees. So adaptive cultures are ones that are usually tied to successful companies that can change with the times. They can see what's happening in the world and modify their products to make them in a better alignment with what today's demands are. And the culture is able to make modifications when necessary to stay adaptive to the changing environments of the world. Now, an inert culture is one that's more conservative, and it encourages the maintenance of the existing culture or resources or ideals of the company. So an inert culture may be a culture of a company that makes a product, like cigarettes or guns or lawn equipment, something that's been around for hundreds of years, that doesn't require much change, and there may be some social or cultural resistance to the products, but the inert culture kind of ignores those changes, seeing them as temporary, and just encourages the status quo of the current culture and company. Now, a company with a strong culture has deep-rooted, deep-seated values and ideas and the ways of thinking that are a little bit closed off to change, and a little bit insulated from. I don't want to say necessarily closed off to change. I want to say this just really strong in their beliefs, sort of like a company like Chick-fil-A that has a strong culture, corporate culture tied to a Christian religion, even so much to the point where they will not open on Sundays, and even so much as they will be exclusive of certain groups that that don't fit their ideal Christian beliefs. So that's a really strong culture focused around that particular ideal. Other cultures may have strong cultures focused around a charismatic leader. sort of like Steve Jobs and Apple, we could consider a very strong culture because he was such a strong leader and figure. He established a strong culture of innovation with the company. And strong cultures typically know who they are, what their strategy is, and what their purpose are. And you can telltale signs of a strong culture is a culture where the employees, down from the lowest paid employee to the top employee, can all identify the culture of the company and have a strong allegiance to the culture. Now, a weak culture would be a culture that um, has a lack of consistency among different divisions, among different departments, among different employees. So there could be a big difference in the values people have, in the ways of thinking that people have by members of the organization. So a weak culture is just the company doesn't have much of a culture. And this can be sometimes when there's a large turnover of personnel or a merger of two companies, they can develop a conflicting or weaker culture. So diversity is one thing that can help establish and develop cultures. It can help to bring different points of view into an organization. It can help to bring different ideas, different concepts and cultures, different strengths to a corporation. So diversity is really a strength of a corporation because most companies and their culture are going to sell to the entire population or demographics of a country or the world. And those demographics include many different groups. So having representation of those groups in your company so you could get a better feedback of their values, their ideas, things they like, things in their tradition, or things that they would be more willing to purchase, that as well as strengths of different cultures can bring a real core strength to a company's culture. And now, research in this area is not always conclusive as far as how to tie diversity to the strength of a company's culture or the strength of the business, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just hasn't really been conclusively proven one way or the other. But most managers feel that having a diverse team builds upon a strength of a culture and a broadening of ideas for the company to develop. Now, it can be difficult to shape the culture of a company. Once a company's culture has formed, making changes is sort of like turning the Titanic around. So cultural change is a very complex process that is rarely done overnight. I mean, you're changing the habitual way people feel and think about a company, the habitual way people think about what the company's goals are, and how their products are going to meet and satisfy the customers. So it's really difficult to change in the short term. It's something that has to be continuously reinforced, and a lot of cultural change efforts can fail due to lack of understanding from the employees about how the company is trying to change the culture, why they're trying to change the culture. So it takes a lot of information, a lot of education, and a lot of support from top management and middle management. And what really derails sometimes when people are shaping the culture of the company is some of the managers may not be on board, or they may not understand, or the employees may get conflicting messages between the old culture and the new culture the company's trying to steer towards. So in many cases, to help shape the culture of a company, sometimes members of the corporation that are resistant to or just are not getting the message or not changing may have to be let go, and new people may have to be hired to really shape and enhance and change the culture to the point to hopefully a better alignment with the company's strategic goals and plans. Now, 5 ways to shape a culture. Number 1, systematically pay attention to areas of the business believed to be linked to the success of a strategy. So in this goal, we want to look at some kind of process of measuring and controlling the activities of those areas, or less formally by making specific comments or questions at meetings about how the business is going to link this new culture to the success of the overall strategy of the company. So once these areas are identified, the firm has to look to a long-term performance and survival, such as customer service, developing new products, or quality control. So they can express their change in their culture by actions, their physical and structural changes in their company. So if the company wants to change their culture to be one that's more customer oriented or quality oriented, they have to start making changes in their customer service policy, how they deal with customers, examples of how customers should be treated, rewards for employees who follow the correct guidelines. The same thing with quality. If new quality wants to be established, new policies, new warranties, new scope of projects of manufacturing. And the same thing with new product development. If a company wants to be seen as, say, a more green company or more socially responsible company, then they need to develop products that are going to maybe have less packaging, get better fuel economy, use less of palm oil, which could be destructive to rainforests, things of this nature to really kind of show, don't tell, how they're changing the culture. 2, react strategically to critical incidents and organizational crisis. So the way the CEO deals with some sort of crisis, as declining sales, as an event, maybe an oil spill or a chemical leak, technological obsolescence of key technology, which means basically technology is no longer useful. New things have developed to kind of replace it. Emphasis on norms, values, and working procedures. So when the opportunity arises, an incident occurs, the way top management deals with it is very critical to the company's success. In the past, top management of McDonald's and Starbucks have been challenged by events that have happened in the restaurants, and they have taken time out of their business days to address this with all employees and provide training and reinforcement of where they want the culture to be and how what has happened isn't right for the culture. 3, serve as the deliberate role model, teacher, or coach. So this is critical for shaping the culture. All management has to become some sort of role model to the employees, a teacher and a coach, not only to the employees but to suppliers, customers, other businesses they deal with. So there has to be a model behavior that is reinforced that the organization wants to adapt. So executives have to give up their way of thinking and demonstrate by example and make opportunities where they can express and support the culture to send a message to the rest of their employees that they're serious, they're on board, and they have to constantly be vigilant to want to change the culture and show and demonstrate how they'll do that in employees and help to reinforce and coach and teach employees down to that method as much as possible. So one attempt could be maybe customer service. So they need to state more policies, provide instructions, maybe make training videos, reward customers that are appreciated. Employees who are appreciated by customers, enhance customer feedback, really in a modality to reinforce and establish this change. 2, strategically allocate rewards and status. So for the leaders who are prioritizing this new strategic cultural change, they need to put their money where their mouth is. So when these new priorities are being followed, they can be reinforced with pay raises, promotions, appraisals, rewards that can be in the form of just certain prizes, could be in the form of recognition or certifications, something to really document and reward members of the organization who adapt the culture and develop it further. And finally, 5, modify the procedures through which an organization recruits, selects, promotes, and terminates employees. So if you have a well-defined procedure of how you're hiring people, what employees need to do to be promoted, how values of the firm, beliefs and behaviors can closely fit into the changing value system, and how the reinforcement of this seen through new hires, promotion, or establishment of new positions. So cultures have to do this in the long term, and hiring individuals who possess the proper alignment and attributes and the ability to communicate and stand with the new culture are critical, because they don't have the history of a legacy of the old culture kind of tapping away in the back of their mind how things used to be done. They can come in fresh, be taught the new culture, and hit the ground running and help to reinforce and support and encourage a new culture to be adapted. So now when you the way you hire people and the way you terminate people are very important. So if people are terminated, they need to be terminated in a just and fair way, and why they're being terminated needs to be, properly documented and understood by the employees, so they can see that, okay, if I do these things, be mean to the customers or be abusive to my coworkers, it results in termination. So it helps to change the culture when they see the consequences when people ignore the cultural changes that a company is trying to make. Now, of course, global concerns, companies have to think globally when they're thinking about, strategic change, leadership, organizational behavior. So now when managers think that the way they do things in their particular region or country, say the United States, these leadership styles may not fly overseas. So organizational cultural ideals, if managers think they're going to work everywhere, they're in for a big shock, because you bring your business in companies like Walmart and Target. Walmart's failed in Germany when they haven't really weren't able to really establish or understand how things should be managed and leadership styles that work in Germany. And similar things happened to Target in Canada, where the Target stores in Canada all had to close because of really a lack of understanding of how to properly lead the employees and supervisors to provide customers what they needed. So organizational values and norms must be tailored to the unique fit of the culture of each country. So, organizations must operate to a certain extent the way different countries operate. And I can give you an example that, when I teach in Denmark, I can't teach like I teach in the States. The way I would manage and run a course in the United States would not work in Denmark. In fact, if I try, there's even laws. One law states that I cannot issue any homework for the course. So where I normally would issue homework as a part of the overall course objectives, in Denmark, it's against the law to have any homework. The only grade I can issue is tied to the final project or the final exam. So it's a very different way of teaching there, where you're not focusing on the students on a weekly basis, but you're crafting a course that over the long term is going to result in the pass or fail of an exam. So, and they have different cultural norms of how they learn and how they want to be treated as students that I have to adapt to if I want to teach in that particular culture. So it's very different. Now, strategic leadership. Now, of course, the best change in strategical culture or strategy is going to be executed by leaders who can secure the cooperation of others. So if you're a dynamic leader that people just look up to and want to follow, you'll be very successful in this. There are some leaders, we've all had bosses like this, where they just disgust us. We don't want to follow them. We want to work against them. We want to passive aggressive towards them because they're poor leaders and we just can't take it. So that's something that, as a company, you don't want to have these poor leaders. You want to spot them early, not support them, terminate them, and bring in better leaders. So strategic leaders are ones that can bring in, they're more than just the typical managerial leadership. They create a vision for the company. They develop an overall, people look up to them. They develop strategies, and they're able to put confidence and empowerment into individuals and encouragement to put those strategies into action. They can really be a cheerleader. They can be a teacher, a coach, and all these things to really facilitate the direction the company wants to go into. So there are different leadership styles that leaders can choose to help facilitate this change in culture or reinforcement of culture or success in implementing the strategy of a company. So two of them that we could talk about is transactional leadership, which is using the authority of their office to exchange rewards such as pay and status to employees for employees' work efforts to generally seek and enhance the organization's performance. So this is a typical leader that's really in the trenches, looking at how people are performing, offering them praise, offering them, perks and rewards, promotions and raises to reinforce their performance. And a traditional tool here is a daily, weekly, quarterly, and annual review of employees to really reinforce them. And a key strategy here is that you, on a weekly basis, you want to correct bad behaviors and correct mistakes. And on an annual basis, you want to recognize success and rewards and tie that to a merit increase. And here a lot of managers make a mistake that when they do an annual review, they bring up all the bad stuff you did all year long that they never told you about and hit you with it at the annual review with no raise. That immediately shuts down an employee and makes them want to leave the company, look for other work, or to passive aggressively work against you during the next year as an employee of yours because they're hostile towards you now because you did such, quite frankly, a horrible job in the annual review. So if you're a manager, you should be correcting problems or bringing up issues all year long, giving the employee the chance to correct them. You're not supposed to punish them in the annual review and berate them and reward them with no raise just because you saved up every bad thing they did all year long. No, the annual review should be for the success and the reinforcement of how they've positively worked for the year, followed by some sort of promotion or raise. And that's very transactional type of leadership. Now, transformational type of leaders are more rare. These are leaders like Steve Jobs that are an inspiration. Their involvement, their crafting, involving the mission, the dream, the vision, and they're restating it to employees, reinforcing it, being demanding, but achieving. The thing is, you can be demanding and you could be precise, but if you achieve results by this, you'll be seen as transformational. If you don't achieve results, you won't be seen as a very effective leader at all. So it's a tough leader to be, someone who's very transformational. You have to get results to get the status of being transformational. Doing all the actions and hoping for a transformation, if it doesn't occur, you're just really a bad leader. So it's a risky position to take, but sometimes people have extreme confidence, extreme ego. It could be really transformational figures that can improve the leadership. Now, the transformational leadership is going to be associated with innovation, like Steve Jobs or Dyson, the guy who created the vacuum cleaners that were very innovative, or many of the blue ocean types of leaderships. These are going to be, example. Types of leaders that make a huge impact on the way they think, their commitment to the ideals, and the success they have in their companies. So if we look at economists, they identified 5 types of innovation. New products, companies developing new products, new materials or resources to enhance the current products, new markets to sell the products in, new production processes to manufacture the products, and new forms of organization. So these are where areas where innovation can be utilized to, from transformational leaders. So now it's a process called creative destruction. So we want to take what's old and not working, destroy it, and create a new form or a new element that's going to rise up as a phoenix to really recreate the company and the success of the leadership of the company. Now, in practice, most leaders they're far from both extremes. They're somewhere in the middle, and a lot of the most pragmatic styles, the best styles, depend on the situation. So, called on the situation, the leader maybe have to be inspirational, motivational, and then sometimes leaders may have to be transformational in style. So, a lot of times, leaders at the top can have the opportunity to be more transformational and more motivational, where leaders in the middle management are going to be more, they have opportunities to be transformational, but mostly going to be transactional as they're dealing more closely with subordinates and things of that nature. So leadership skills are connected to the personality of a leader. So each leader has their own different personality and their own different growth trajectories, and you may have a more transactional type of leader that does eventually form into a transformational leader. It really depends on the circumstances and opportunities and employees and the company and type of products that they work with. Now, when we talk about emotional intelligence, this is critical for leaders to have a real empathy or emotional intelligence to see how their employees are reacting to their leadership style. So to be successful, you really have to have a collection of experiences, psychological attributes that are going to give you the ability to know what motivates people, have the empathy to see the problems and issues that are occurring with people, be self-aware of how you are being perceived, how your decisions and actions will affect others, and your social skills, how to really connect with people, get them to like you, get them to be on your side, get them to want to work with you or extend your ideas. This is something that, emotional intelligence is the most important skill for a leader. So I'd say experience is the second most skill, but the emotional intelligence, just knowing how to connect with people, how to reinforce, validate people, support people, this is the most important thing for a leader. As you know, you've had plenty of bosses that have zero emotional intelligence that just make your life miserable and make your life a horror show. So, companies can, it's very hard to do this in a training scenario. So companies can try to train, can try to reinforce, but it's generally sort of how a person develops over their lifetime is connected to their emotional intelligence. So generally, and you can see when executives really like their work, have a passion for what they're doing, are more socially oriented, want to know the people they work with, want to really care about their problems, understand their needs, want to help out, express what companies able to do to help them, treat their subordinates with respect. They're likely to gain the trust and the confidence and the support necessary to make these changes, to have this leadership. Without support or your employees giving you the benefit of the doubt or some time to give you a chance for your ideas, you're never going to succeed as a leader. So you really have to win the people over first, and then you can really make time for change or expect them to work with you to follow your lead and move forward on what you need to do. So it's really critical that leaders join or get involved in social opportunities, really connect to and know their employees. And one first step many leaders can do is just to get to know employees' names, their names, and then maybe the names of some of their family members, some of the problems they're going through, and follow up with them. Get their trust and talk about taking time to talk about some personal things or some things that are important to your subordinates or employees isn't a waste of time. It isn't wasting time in chit chat. It's really developing a rapport, developing a trust that will enable you to work with them better in the future and make them stronger partners in the the company you're trying to grow. So if we want to execute change, there is a 3-step process. So if we want to execute this strategic change, one is recognize the need for a change. If a company doesn't need to know it needs to change, that's a big problem. So of course, recognizing something's not working, we need to change. And a lot of times companies, this happens too late, and it's too little too late. So poor performance usually is a kick in the pants that's going to get companies to realize we have to change, or we're going to have to replace people with outsiders with more knowledge and experience. So sometimes new leaders can really bring in a breath of fresh air and ideas that can help to facilitate this change or recognize what needs to be changed. Because sometimes when you've been in the company too long, you can't really see the forest for the trees. So a fresh perspective is needed. So companies get into situations where big one is when retail is suffering from more online sales. You need really innovation and a need to change your business model to be able to stay in business when the clicks are doing better than the bricks. Number 2, create a shared vision of what the change will look like. So the more detailed and elaborate the plan is for the change, the more easier it is to communicate the vision and then show the steps to achieve the success of the vision into the change process, is an example of what's going to be successful. So when you're doing some sort of restructuring or a big change, there has to be a shared vision of where the company is going to be. What's the goal of what we want to develop into? And this is a common vision for the company's future that you can express, and then employees can all collectively see, interpret, agree upon, and move towards. And number 3 is institutionalize the change. So change starts at the top. So top managers have to have a strong commitment and a strong understanding of what the change is. And they have to convey that to other top management teams and reinforce that. And then they have to convey that to supervisors and then finally to employees. So strategic change efforts are not going to succeed unless there's an institutional incorporation of the change, a documentation, an education, a follow-through, and a review of this process. So without the implementing it's fine, but without really solidifying this change in the whole overall fabric of the corporation, you're not going to be successful. Okay, so that is it for chapter 11. I look forward to talking to you in chapter 12, our last chapter, and have a good day.